I believe 2026 and 2027 will be two of the worst years in the stock market, that it'll actually be down and could be down hard.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials for November 10th through November 17th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, 2025 1-ounce silver Canadian maples are just $6.75 over spot. Next, our choice 1-ounce palladium bars are only $199 over spot. Finally, pre-1933 BU $20 Saint Gaudens coins are only $99 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend Peter Grandich from Peter Grandich Company. Thank you so much for joining us today, Peter.
It is always truly a pleasure to speak with you, Elijah.
Well, it's great to have you today, especially as we're seeing gold and silver pop over the last couple of days. Silver back above $50. I guess when we air this, we'll see if it's still above that. As we saw the New York Open, gold and silver have been getting slammed downwards here. It seems like volatility in both directions over the last couple of days. What do you make of what's happening?
Well, first let me take a step back. After being, you couldn't have been more of an ardent bull than I was for several years. But even I felt a couple months ago, we needed a correction. We were in a parabolic race. We did. We got slightly under 4,000. There was a chance talking about, can go as low as 3,600. And Elijah, as I told you before we started recording, even I'm impressed of how well gold handled a natural needed corrective phase and has resumed its climb again. Listen, we up $100 and something yesterday. Now, granted, when gold was 2,000, that was like a $50 day. We must keep that in mind. But nevertheless, I'm not surprised today, that we opened higher, saw some follow-through buying, and then, of course, some profit taking. But nevertheless, both gold and silver, gold still leading, silver's tagging along, but both of them most impressive on how they've come through this corrective phase. And of course, they're doing this in the face of the still stiff competition. Everybody and their mother, I hope I can say it that way, Elijah, is touting Bitcoin. There isn't two posts where there isn't another Bitcoin prophecy. That they're talking trillions, the president, his kids, every bank's going to have it. There's all sorts of law, and it can't get out of its own way, and it's rolling over, which and this is all happening while gold just remains really, really strong. So I have to tell you, even I'm impressed. I thought the corrective phase could last longer. It still may back and fill here, but I think anybody that was looking for, 500 or 1,000, these people popped out of the woods all of a sudden saying it was over. We're going back down towards 2,000, but just very, very impressive so far on how gold has handled itself.
You talk about how there's a possibility of a bit more of a correction. What kind of levels are you looking for here at the moment to kind of show that, that where the bottom is in right now?
Well, I wouldn't even call it more of a correction. I think I would say, you never say never in this business, but I would say it's an 8 or 9 out of 10 chance that we've seen the lows. So, just under 3,900 maybe. Look, we just had today news. We had the ADP number, which has always been much more dependable than the government numbers. And if you think they didn't hanky-pank with the employment number before, wait till Trump has his person in there, how those numbers going to come out. But the ADP numbers today were very negative. Dollar got hit hard, a real softening economy. We're seeing a lot of geopolitical news. That one of the things that I think helped turn gold around, and almost no one in the mainstream media talked about it, but not surprising, is what's happening around Venezuela. So we sent a whole bunch of military down there, and guess what? Russia and China has as well, and has been adamantly supporting the fact that the United States should not consider an attack on Venezuela. I also think the geopolitical concerns is that people witness that Trump blinked. That I felt that he went from day one the wrong way. He took a big stick into this trade war when he should have took an olive branch. And basically he blinked, especially to China. Nothing net has been gained from China. Even China today put out news that, hey, we'll give you some magnets for your civilian, but we're not going to give it to the military. Of course they're not going to give it to them. We have a defense guy that's in charge of the defense saying we're going to defend Taiwan. They're talking about one day they're going to take control of Taiwan, and they're going to send us magnets that are going to be used to help fight them. It's preposterous what people don't look at in the general financial media. But I think all of this, and then just the long-term story about the change in monetary, that people are recognizing that gold's money again, that central banks are getting rid of bonds, including our own, and adding gold as a monetary base. And when you start hearing, this I think was perhaps the biggest news in weeks, when Main Street brokerage firms, and forgive me, whether it was JP Morgan or somebody like that, actually started talking about taking 20% away from bonds in the 60-40 plan and going 60% equities, 20% bonds, and 20% gold. Man, if you needed anything for an early Christmas present as someone that sells gold bullion, you got it, my friend.
When it comes to the miners as well, we saw a huge sell-off in miners, last month. What is your take on where they are at the moment as we rebound a bit here?
Well, they corrected like just gold did. I wouldn't call it huge. I'd call it a needed and necessary. But here's the thing to remember now. Another quarter's gone by. They're selling gold. Imagine you're a Canadian gold producer. Gold is around $6,000 Canadian. And the biggest cost may be for a producer up there in the area of 2,000, some are below that. Man, they'll take that profit margin all day, especially when oil prices are going lower, which is one of the biggest expense, and labor costs. So the majors are in excellent shape, but what's been very pleasing for a person that made such huge bets on the junior resource end of the market, they're now stepping down aggressively and doing deals, particularly one where a Mexican major producer who had no interest in Canada up until just a couple of weeks ago, and now went out and made a major purchase of a company in Quebec. So I think A, the majors are going to keep printing money. B, their stocks are going to do quite well. And C, M&A in the metals and mining industry is into its highest gear in years.
Would you say, I guess, looking forward here, especially for the miners, what I think is so interesting is, you did see that sell-off, as you mentioned, in the miners, but still, the cash flow potential for so many of these, it's such a positive story at the moment, given that, gold has doubled over the last couple of years, silver as well has doubled. The margins must just be incredible at the moment.
Well, let's look at that. The last great bull market was 2010 and 11, and they are in far better financial shape then. They're not leveraged as they were then. Listen, by 2014 or 15, many of the majors were concerned we're going to be able to keep the lights on. So they are in a much better shape. Number two, they are recognizing that we are in a unique political environment where politicians who never stood next to miners and wanted to be seen with miners now openly embrace them and call for it. I'm involved in a play in British Columbia, in an area that maybe 20 years ago people would say, oh, they'll never have a mine there or whatever. Now we had from the far left political arm, politically in their own house, embrace this company and tell people how important it was. So this critical mineral talk that people hear about is real. Governments, because of decades of ignoring it, and it can't happen overnight. People talking about, the United States and Canada, they can pass all the laws and put all the money aside. This isn't just something you go out, you buy it, and you start using it tomorrow. It'll take years to get to that level. And that's why the majors recognize that right now they've had cards to play unlike any other time in the 40 years I've been in this business.
Moving forward here with respect to the general stock market, what we've seen right now over the last couple of years, it seems like we're seeing kind of a melt up in everything, right? But a lot of people are calling for a turning point here where we could see a sell-off in the stock market and actually gold and silver potentially rallying. So they're going to be moving in opposite directions. What is your outlook there with respect to the stock market? It seems like a lot of big players are pulling chips off, selling equities at the moment. Warren Buffett, having his, a huge cash position. Your take on the stock market at the moment with respect to the metals markets?
Well, if there is a melt up, it's very thin. It's not widely participated. Again, it's basically in technology and more thinner in AI. I think we're starting to see some of the potential negative ramifications. We're starting to see, classic people who recognize bubbles before getting very negative on the AI. We're starting to see that they are performing what had happened back 20-something years ago when they start to use unique ways of financing each other to try to keep the game going. The only thing that I think that could prevent that sell-off is we're getting into a very seasonally positive period for the stock market. No charcoal wants to be seen in a stocking from about our Thanksgiving through New Year's. It tends to be a point in time when people are just merry. Now, there's been a couple of times when the stock market went down in December, but basically December tends to be a good month. And here's why I think it's important to use our Thanksgiving Day for us Americans. After that, you're not going to see hedge funds making any type of bets. They've already figured out what their payout's going to be. Remember, they get paid on the performance of the year. They get the 20%. And most of them are up this year. It's been a pretty decent year for them. So I don't think they're going to be risk adverse and be heavy sellers or buyers. So I think any of the major downturns that can occur are going to occur in 2026. But let me tell you this, and you're the first interviewer I'm sharing this with. I've spoken it to my own clients and followers in recent days. I believe 2026 and 2027 will be two of the worst years in the stock market, that it'll actually be down and could be down hard to the point where cash, separate from metals, what holding for metals, is the predominant feature in the portfolios, at least to our planning group clients that I've shared. And I use this kind of analogy when they ask, well, Peter, how much should I have? Whatever your age is, that's the percentage. So in other words, if you're 30, 30% cash. You're going to be 70 like me, near 70. And the reason is if I'm right about a couple of bad years, especially for those who retire that can't afford any loss of principal, they can ill afford that and then try to somehow make it up in the latter years. So overall, we may still hang on for the balance of this year and not have any widespread decline. But I think 2026 and 2027 could be among the two worst years we've had in decades.
And in times past, there have been moments like in 2008 and COVID where precious metals sell off quite dramatically along with the stock market. It's not necessarily perfectly correlated there. I know Christopher Mullen has talked about how during the beginning of the 2008 sell-off, you saw a rally in metals, but it seems like there seems to be liquidity events where people are getting margin calls and all of that, and they have to sell anything, and precious metals and miners go along with that. So do you anticipate that in 2026, a sell-off in gold and silver along with the stock market?
Well, I don't think it's going to happen in a crash form. That's why you have that. When you have suddenly people down 20, 30, 40% and the margin department's calling you, you sell whatever you can in order to meet that. And you ask questions later. I don't think it's a crash that's going to occur. And I believe it's going to be a rollover and leakage. And there are a lot of reasons, including a loss of the political strength that Trump has had, economic weakness that's going to be really seen by everybody, silver unrest. There's a whole bunch of things now. There's actually 12 points that I've shared on why that'll be. But I think that's going to be over time, Elijah. And as long as it's over time, gold won't be sold because people have to raise money. And quite frankly, again, I want to point to what we said in the onset of this, and I may be singing to the choir, but we're seeing financial service firms. Listen, for 39 of the 40 years that I've been in this business, Wall Street treated gold like kryptonite. They didn't want to go near it. They feared it would kill them because it kills their favorite things, stocks and bonds. And now we have major financial institutions openly telling their clients to make gold part of their portfolio. So I don't know how then we have huge declines when they're first coming to this. Now, when we start going to parties and taking the Uber and the guy that's waiting on us is telling us about some hot gold stock or why you should own gold, maybe that's going to be a time when we reach the peak, but we're so far from that I'm not concerned about it at all.
It is interesting given the current environment that we're in. I mean, you mentioned how it's not going to be a crash, but more of a slow sell-off in the stock market. That probably won't trigger a lot of margin calls. And it reminds me of how, like in very inflationary periods, you can have the stock market kind of just go sideways and people are not freaking out. But at the end of the day, they're losing a lot of their capital compared to other things that they can actually buy because the value of the dollar is falling. So it's kind of like a silent crash. Do you anticipate that kind of in 2026 and 2027? If the stock market, stays flat or goes down just slightly, people might not notice how much it's actually falling in real terms.
Yeah, they won't. But there's other thing that I think is very important that I might have missed. I should have stated earlier to you is this also, the other bullish reason for gold. Let's get out of just looking at what's happening in the U.S. in gold, and let's look what's happening in the world, particularly where there's growth in the world, predominantly on Asia. They're getting on lines to buy gold, and they're taking their weekends, young Chinese, Asian, Vietnamese, going into stores to buy physical gold, ownership of gold, not just because it's a pretty necklace, but as an investment. And what's happening on our weekends here in the U.S., Elijah? We have people going into stores to buy stuff they really don't need with money they don't have. So that's another bullish factor. And if somebody said to me, what's the single biggest difference in this global market than any others you've been in? And that is the dominant nature of the physical market. The paper hangers, the people who have manipulated, we call it the Crimex, the Comex, whatever you want to call it, out of London, New York, they're at least badly wounded, if not. Now, that doesn't mean like in the old baseball, they bring the old timers back once a year and they get their day to hit a few pitches. But I think the paper market, which we were used to and always saying, okay, it's only a matter of time till they show up, they've been destroyed. And main reason they've been destroyed is because their market has been taken away from them. Gold has moved to the Far East, and the people in the Far East have other desires to use gold other than as a paper hanging place. And that's why I think is another bullish reason why we're not going to have major downturns anytime soon in the gold market.
Now, looking at the day's news, the last couple of days, I think one of the reasons that the stock market popped and precious metals popped is it seems like the government shutdown might be ending soon. Your take on that, and do you think that's going to have any, long-term effect on the stock market here?
One of the 12 points that I have about my concerns about the general stock market is political divisiveness. And I think what people should realize now, imagine if we have another financial crisis, whatever causes it, could these groups go in and do anything close to anything that's been done in the past financial crisis? And I think the answer is no. Let's also not forget that they're just pushing it off again. They're going to, first of all, we haven't had a balanced budget since 1991. I mean, you and I would have been long broke, gone family if we kept not balancing our budgets for all that time. And with that comes the 38 trillion. Trump's out again saying that, Bitcoin's going to solve and pay the debt. No, all this stuff. And what are we doing? We're piling up that debt at the fastest pace ever. And we have no political harmony anymore. Zero. Even within the parties. I mean, this senator, give him credit, the Fetterman from Pennsylvania, who everybody thought before he was elected was, crazy guy, how's he the senator? He's probably been on both sides, the most sane middle ground, considering about America first, both from Republican and Democrat. And they want to throw him under the bus. The Democrats want to, so the political disharmony, that even if they patch it up and they push it out to January, it's done a lot of damage. You know how much economic damage was done? How many people? I have 3 different friends and clients are still stuck in towns that they couldn't get flights back and all, and their businesses up. I mean, there's just so much going on. The bottom line is this: Trump has given some hope early initially on, but I don't think he's followed through on some of the most key things that I think are going to be critical. And I think he's even going to see a loss of his political backness. So as we get into 2026 and we start to have primaries for the elections and all, I just think that's going to be another negative reason for the stock market. And all these things, all of them, are all bullish for the gold market. There's nothing yet. Somebody asked me the other day, and maybe, Elijah, I'll put words in your mouth by having me ask it myself to myself. What's the one thing that would turn you off on gold if we saw central banks start selling for whatever reason of any significant size? Then I think the party would be over, no matter where we're at. But right now, nothing could be further from the truth, and that's why I remain so bullish long term.
No, when we have you on, we really appreciate also your faith-based approach. Can you share a bit about that in these times? You know, it seems like there's a lot of crazy things happening in the world, but it's good to stay grounded in your faith. And that's something you actually bring to your company as well.
Well, thank you for that time. You always give me that, and I appreciate it, especially now when we get into a season where even people that may not be very faith-inspired tend to be a little bit more spiritually led in terms of wanting to help and maybe throw an extra couple dollars in. Or what we did see during this shutting of the government was something quite interesting. We saw, just like we saw when COVID hit, how many Americans are so dependent that they can't really last more than a couple weeks on their own. And I'm not here to judge any of them, but the bottom line was we saw within a week or two, people had no ability to even feed themselves. We saw with COVID, as soon as people couldn't work, they couldn't pay bills, so we had to create trillions of dollars out of the air. But what we should be really looking at that is, and the movement for myself is how many Americans now have trouble just feeding themselves, clothing themselves, housing themselves. And I'm not going to get too caught up on whether they're an American or an illegal alien. For me, they're all God's children. There's no difference from the spiritual eyes on that. And I think one of the things that hopefully will be moved out of this, and I saw some of this, I'm very involved. I just did a conference here this past Saturday with a well-known person from the metals industry. We raised almost $13,000 now for a local food pantry who's in desperate need of it. But the amount of people that we saw throughout the nation who were really concerned about where would I even be able to eat tonight, I think we should say to those of us who've been blessed with bounties of food and not concerns about that, that we need to find it in our hearts and our spirit, not just around Thanksgiving and Christmas, it's important, but 12 months a year to find ways of doing that. I know, and I speak for my wife, that we could get a bigger car, we could get a bigger house, we could take more vacations, but we've concluded now, especially, with all the blessings, and just so you know, I'm going to be a grandpa for the first time. So with that and all, and measuring how those blessings are, I think we're called extra special now to help our fellow human beings and not worry about the color of their skin or the nationality at this point, but they are all our God's children, even those who are advocating against what our God stands for. That's the ultimate test of a Christian. That's the ultimate thing, to accept what Jesus said, to love him with all our heart and love others and love our enemy. And let me tell you that's probably the hardest thing. And I haven't managed to do it yet, but I haven't given up trying.
Well, congratulations on that, being a grandfather for the first time here. So, and what you mentioned also is, that in these economic times, it's going to be, unfortunately, more and more prevalent that people are really struggling to just make ends meet. And it reminds me of how a lot of people in our community are, looking forward to like the $5,000 gold, $100 silver, whatever. And just a reminder of that might be good for your portfolio, but also do you even want to, what kind of world will it be like when a gold and silver are those levels? So just to keep that in mind as well, and recognize that, to definitely use our resources properly and to think about that as well, how we can help others.
And if that crisis comes because of all hardships and somehow you were prevalent enough to be smart enough to own it and whatever, don't hoard it completely. A little less, you'll still be able to go by and the wonders that you see, if I can just close with this, Elijah, the wonders that you see when people get that little extra food that didn't think, their gratefulness, you can't measure that in dollars. And there's just a feeling that you get of joy that nothing else, even seeing gold go up $100 comes close to equaling, to see another human being be happy or be glad about something. And I'm not saying you're godlike, but you're called by, as you and I as Catholic Christians, that's mandatory. That's not an option. It's mandatory. And so we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And it's a struggle to do that. We're in you and I have failed human natures. We're sinners saved by grace. And but thank for that grace, because none of us make it without it.
Fantastic. Well, we'll have to leave it on that note today, Peter. If our viewers are interested in learning more, they can go to petergrandich.com. Can you share with us a bit about that?
Sure. That's the website. We're a planning group here just for U.S. citizens. Most of my commentary is on my X page. And of course, there's also a YouTube channel where I'm blessed to put people like yourself that graced me with this time, that allowed me to share my thoughts. And again, I can't thank you enough for not only I'm not talking about gold, but most importantly, these last few minutes. They're very precious, and may God bless you, Elijah, and your father and your family for giving this opportunity to share to the good word of what Jesus came to tell everyone.
Same to you, Peter. God bless, and you have a fantastic Veterans Day.
God bless.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for November 10th through November 17th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, 2025 1-ounce silver Canadian maples are just $6.75 over spot. Next, our choice 1-ounce palladium bars are only $199 over spot. Finally, pre-1933 BU $20 Saint Gaudens coins are only $99 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.